There is one enormous cloud hanging over all of us, which requires responsibility from leaders. Global climate change is already violently affecting communities, and believe me, if it continues down the current trend line, we will see climate refugees fighting each other for water and seeking food and new opportunity.
So Obama's talking about all of this with the global warming and that, and a lot of it's a hoax. It's a hoax. I mean, it's a money-making industry, okay? It's a hoax.
So what's climate-induced migration? Climate-induced migration is when the impacts of climate change are such that you can no longer live in your country of nationality. You either have to move internally because of coastal erosion, you'll have to move inland. Because of the intensity and higher frequency of natural disasters, you'll have to migrate inland, or you will have to leave abroad.
On pense toujours que les gens viennent dans un camp de réfugiés à cause de la guerre, mais visiblement ici, il y a un autre type de personnes venues à cause de la sécheresse.
Oui, absolument. Il y a beaucoup de gens qui viennent dans ce camp à cause de la sécheresse. Par exemple, en 2011, il y a eu une très grave sécheresse dans la Corne de l'Afrique. Des milliers de gens ont été déplacés. En un jour, il arrivait parfois jusqu'à 2000 personnes dans le camp.
If indeed the industrialized nations of the world cause a climate change of 4 degrees over the century, that is itself one of the great injustices of the age.
People displaced from their homes by changing temperatures, by changing sea levels, and by extreme weather events. Most of those people will be among our planet's poorest and most vulnerable people. And these will be the first victims of our failure to prevent climate change. Because where people have no opportunity to recover or capacity to adapt to the effects of climate change, they will have no other option but to flee their homes, seeking shelter wherever they can.
97.07% of planetary climate change impacts are caused by the OECD nations. Okay? So Australia, New Zealand, Europe, the US, these are the people that provide the emissions. Okay? 0.03% of the planet suffer their consequences, which are the people that I'm from. The brown-skinned ocean paradise, which is called the Pacific. And that's neither here nor there. The relevance of that is that the Convention needs to make provision for that, okay? If you're a conflict refugee, you get legal socio-economic rights. If you're a political persecution refugee, you get legal socio-economic rights. If you're in your house in Kiribati or Tuvalu and the ocean is coming into your living room and you've got nowhere else to live because all these emissions have put your house underwater, you get no rights whatsoever.
À chaque fois qu'ils avaient faim, ils nous attaquaient, nous, les fermiers. Ils nous dépossédaient de nos biens. On n'avait plus rien. On avait tellement faim qu'on s'attachait des pierres avec une corde autour de l'estomac pour ne pas trop sentir la douleur de la faim.
Nobody is stronger and nuclear than I am. It's the biggest single problem that this world has. Not global warming. You know, Obama said the biggest problem we have is global warming. And by the way, it's supposed to be 70 degrees today. It's freezing here. Speaking of global warming, we need some global warming. It's freezing. Man.
ইসলামপুর আমরা মনে করেন বাড়ি রয়েছি থাকা পরে রাতে শুয়েছি শোয়ার পরে মনে করেন শুয়েছি শোয়ার পরে দেখি কি সন করতেছে পর আমরা উঠছি উঠতে আইরে পরে দেখি কি গাং ভাঙ্গা লয়ে যাইতেছে গা গাং ভেঙে দিন লয়ে যেতেছিল তখন আমরা ওতে কিরে আমরা গাং ভেঙে যেতেছি আমরা বাড়ি গেতে লয়ে যেতে কই যাবো আমরা পরে এর মধ্যে আল্লাহ কি কাম করে বাড়ি ভেঙে লয়ে গেছে তারপর আমরা আমার এক সন্তান ছিল পেটে আর এক সন্তান ছিল কাকি
Those climate refugees are left without anything. And worst of all, there isn't even an official definition for them, because legally defined refugees are those recognized under the 1951 UN Convention on Refugees. And this convention has been created after the Second World War to address the huge cause and the huge need. And in 2012, the UN recognized and assisted 10.5 million refugees who had to flee from violence, from persecution, and from war. But in the same year, in 2012, climate refugees, people forced from their homes by climate-related events, outnumbered refugees fleeing persecution and violence by more than 3-1. The 1951 Convention was a response to the huge suffering and the biggest human rights issue of the past century. It is still important today, and it must not be changed, because changing it could lead to undermining it. But now with climate change, there's a new threat to our collective human rights, and we have to act on the great suffering and the great need caused by it. Because the fact is, climate refugees face an uncertain future. They are left isolated, lack recognition, and are not protected in any systematic way by the international community, without international help and legally binding agreements. People forced from their homes will have nowhere to go and no means to survive, which is why climate refugees are in urgent need of legal recognition and assistance.
Mais parfois il est trop tard. Voyage vers les îles Kiribati, paradis en passe de devenir un enfer. Les eaux montent, l'archipel est voué à disparaître. Alors un citoyen a demandé le statut de déplacé environnemental en Nouvelle-Zélande. Refusé, aucune loi n'existe.
The reason I think the UN Convention should be amended is because it's not going to be a silver bullet, it's not going to be a magic bullet, but it has to provide a safeguard.
La Convention de Genève de 1951 sur les réfugiés ne mentionne pas le changement climatique. L'initiative Nansen, un lobby lancé par la Suisse et la Norvège, veut changer cela. Le patron de l'Agence de l'ONU pour les réfugiés est déjà convaincu, il faut donner des droits aux déplacés environnementaux.
Le drame, c'est que ces populations qui sont obligées à se déplacer, la plupart d'ailleurs restent dans leur pays, mais ceux qui croisent les frontières n'ont pas un régime de protection légale comme les réfugiés pour des raisons de politique ou de persécution d'une autre nature. Il y a un vide du point de vue du régime de protection.
Surely, as Lord Fusatu'a put it, if you're sitting there and the seas are coming in and your life is going to be destroyed, why shouldn't you be covered? And setting aside the practical difficulties for the moment, is there a moral distinction to be made between that and the deliberate decision to persecute?
I don't think there's a moral difference.
Right.
I think if people's lives are at risk, if they are experiencing terrible suffering, then there is an equal moral obligation on the international community to meet their concerns and do something, take action to do something about that.
148 countries are bound by the terms of the Refugee Convention, and yet today we have more refugees in the world than at any time since the Second World War. The problem, ladies and gentlemen, is not an absence of law, but an absence of political will to implement the law. So that's why we need to think more creatively about preemptive responses to displacement linked to the impacts of climate change and disasters. Governments could do so much right now to help people. They could implement disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation measures to build resilience over time, avert displacement. They could enhance voluntary migration opportunities like labour mobility schemes to help people move before the situation becomes intolerable. They could develop humanitarian visas when people can't return home, and as a last resort, planned relocations of communities could be considered. So when returning to the objections levelled at the Refugee Convention, we need to be cautious about misdiagnosis and reaching for the treaty equivalent of euthanasia. Many of the alleged deficiencies of the Convention are misplaced, And to suggest that the problems we see today are its fault is simply to misapprehend the Convention's origins and its purpose.